Michelle Marie McGrath.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of Unclassified Woman. Today I'm speaking to the lovely Fiona Ferris in Hawke's Bay, New Zealand. Fiona is an author who writes about living a simple, beautiful and successful life and believes that you don't have to spend a lot of money to do this. Through her books on Amazon and popular blog howtobechic.com, Fiona provides thousands of women from all around the world with the tools and inspiration to elevate the everyday from mundane to magical. She lives with her husband, Paul, 2 rescue cats and 2 rescue dogs. And I think you'll really enjoy this conversation. I first connected with Fiona through her blog, and I was very interested in her Writer's Inspiration Tips newsletters, which is so practical and helpful. So I really suggest, if you've always dreamed of writing, that you check out her blog and her tips and hints. They're very practical, very down to earth, and make it all seem very easy. And she really breaks down all the different steps, so she's completely transparent about all the how-tos, and it's just really helpful. So enjoy. So welcome, Fiona. Great to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Michelle. It's a fabulous honour to be on your podcast.
Lovely to hear your gorgeous Kiwi voice. I always love the Kiwi accents, and I love this, like talking to, so many amazing women around the world. It's brilliant.
It is pretty cool. I'm here in Hawke's Bay, New Zealand, and you are in England. So,
yes,
yay.
in Cornwall. So actually it looks quite similar in a couple of places with the coastline.
Quite possibly.
I have been to Hawke's Bay, so yeah, that's why I'm saying that.
Well, there you go. Well, you would know. I've not been to Cornwall.
So just to give us a bit of background, Fiona, today, before we start to get into our conversation, would you like to share a little bit with us about your background and whether you've not had a child due to a personal choice or whether it's been a combination of circumstances?
It's actually been a little bit of both. It's been circumstances and personal choice. I married in my 20s and then got divorced and met my second husband, who is awesome. And we decided to try, and I had never tried for children before that. And we got married in our mid to late 30s to have a child, to try for a child. And it did not happen over a couple of years. So we had tests and they said, no, you guys are both fine. But still nothing happened. And that was the circumstances, but the personal choice was that we decided not to go any further and we decided to steer our life in a different way, and it's worked out amazingly well for us. That was 10 years ago. All of that sort of happened. I'm now 47, and we just cannot imagine our life any other way now. It's just like it's worked out perfectly for us. And I do feel a little bit grateful for that, because I know there's a lot of women who do want a child and can't have a child. And it's sort of not takes over their life, but, it's really, really important to them. And yes, it was sort of to me at the time. And I imagine us having a very traditional life where I would stay at home and look after the children. But when that didn't happen, it felt like I'd been given another option to do something a bit different. And it's not that I ever thought about it, like sat there and thought, oh, this is my chance. It just happened. It unfolded over time. And now we feel like the luckiest people in the world. That's how I feel. We both do, actually. We talk about it quite often. And that sounds a bit mean to say that. I don't mean to be, I'm not anti-children or anything, but we're having a really different life than we could have probably if we had had children.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that you were trying for a couple of years and then it didn't happen. And so did you have, because I'm just thinking it's quite common that often whereby it's inexplicable that it's not happening. And so often people do have this experience where they're told that, oh, it's unexplainable infertility. They're not given any reason because they're told that it seems like they're both completely fine. And I think that must be quite a baffling thing to deal with, especially if you're not given any reason like why it's not happening. So it sounds as though you were quite philosophical about it.
Yeah, I have always believed that our path is laid out for us, and we do have choice as well, but we sort of can't see all the good stuff that's in the future. And if we try and control it too much, we might miss out on something. And I just believe that the universe always has our highest good at heart for what we need to be learning or doing in this lifetime. And I just sort of went with the flow, basically.
Yeah. And so did you experience any grief at all in letting go of that as a possibility, of motherhood as a possibility, or did you feel quite resolved about it?
I think there was a tiny amount of, I knew that we would be missing out on something.
Yeah.
And I would be missing out on something, on that experience. But I'll save it for another lifetime. I mean, we sort of talked a small amount about adoption, and my husband wasn't keen on that. And it would be a huge thing. It's basically, I guess, children in general, it's giving your life over to them for quite a long time, and sometimes for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So that's a more of a bigger thing to decide than simply deciding we'll try for a child, because that sounds quite innocent, and then it all happens and you can't go back.
Yes.
Whereas when you adopt, and it's less common these days anyway, it's not like it's easy to adopt.
No, it's not easy at all, is it?
Yeah, so that is a big thing to decide and leap into. So yeah, it's just how it's worked out.
And so did you ever feel any judgment from other people? Like, I know that I've heard so many people say that often, like if they've been in a similar situation to you and they think, okay, well, we're not going to try anymore, they get this ridiculous comment, well, why don't you just adopt then? Like, and as we've just been saying, it's not actually that easy a process anyway, and not everybody resonates with that as an option. It's not something that they necessarily feel drawn to. And so it can be very tricky because there's just so many layers to it and so many variables that, it's unique to each person's situation.
I agree. Yes, for sure. And another thing with me, I think I was diagnosed as celiac a few years later, and infertility can be a thing with that. So
right.
I think there's so much the medical community still don't know. The human body is quite a mysterious machine, and so they just sort of don't know everything, do they?
No, and I've never heard of that before. That's really new to me. That's fascinating. I didn't realise that could be linked.
But in terms of judgment, sorry, going back to your question, if there was any, I wasn't aware of them, because I'm happy in myself. I'm happy in my own choices that we've made, not to sort of try harder to have a child. And there's no guarantee if you do try harder and spend lots of money either that anything will come of it. Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't, and it just adds layers to the unhappiness. You think, oh, I'll never have this thing. But I have had, I know my mum was very keen for us and she offered to help us out, but we didn't, it wasn't the money why we weren't doing it. We just decided, no, we want to just see what happens, and if nothing happens, that's what we'll do. My dad was very he was cruisy. He basically said, you do what you like, you want in life. He's not the norm. He's quite a creative, different entrepreneurial person who has often done things that were different to other people. So he was all for not just going along with people, what people do and say. People often, because I still am at an age where I look like I could have a child, people do have children in their 40s, and I use good skincare. So people say, oh, you're not 47. And so they think, oh, are you having children? No, we're not. Oh, well, one day. Okay, one day. Just leave it at that. I
Yeah,
just
and
had it last week, actually. Yeah.
it's interesting, but see how it's just the assumption there that obviously that's what you want. Even if they don't know anything
Yes.
about you, they assume that that's clearly what you want.
Totally. This lady last week saw me putting my little dogs into the car, into their crate in the back seat of the car. And she goes, "Oh, you'll make a great mum one day. When are you having children?" It's like, I'm not. "Oh, yes, you will." "Okay, bye." As I drove off. Leave her to
Gosh.
that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible, isn't it, really?
Yeah. And I'm okay with it. And 99%, happy. Like I said, there's that 1% tininess that you think, oh, I've missed out and I won't have that experience, but it's not often. But imagine if they were just so tuned up inside and it was a
Yeah,
constant source of grief for them. How awful would that be?
exactly. I mean,
Yeah,
it's that kind of throwaway comment, and it's not small talk, it's not inconsequential.
yes. And it's even somebody might already have a child, but they can't have another one, say. I have a friend who has one daughter, her and her husband, and she for years tried for a second child, and it was the cause of so much grief for her. And I would guess, we haven't talked about it for a long time, but I would guess that it still is.
Yeah.
So there's sort of that as well, where I can imagine it's not just people that don't have children, it's people that might have one and they say, "Oh, it's not fair to have an only child." They might say something like that, but maybe said nicely. And so that would be a problem as well for a lot of people.
But that's another thing again, isn't it? Like, oh, well, if you're an only child, then they're going to be lonely. Well, not necessarily. What are you saying? That they haven't got any friends or like any interactions. So,
Yeah. And a lot of
it's
siblings don't get on well either.
exactly.
Or not that they don't get on, but they just don't have much in common. I have friends who are like an only child because their other sibling, if there's two of them, and there is in this circumstance, in this case, they very rarely see their sibling because they're just so different, and they don't even particularly like them as a person, which is awful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny, like my dad says the same thing. He is one of 11, like large Catholic Irish family. So they had a very hard upbringing and childhood. And he's not really close to his siblings. He was close to a couple of his brothers who are no longer alive. But he always says, it's a myth that big families are close. I'm not close to mine. I don't really even like most of them. I don't feel I've got anything in common apart from the fact we had the same parents. But as far as I'm concerned, we don't really have anything in common. So I've had so many conversations with him about that. And I just I think, gosh, again, it's just one of those things, though, that's assumed, isn't it?
And along the same lines, there's the question of, well, who's going to look after you when you're older? But from what I've seen, it's more that the parents look after the children until a late age.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen that, but I've seen plenty of situations where the parents are bankrolling their kids because the kids are so hopeless, bailing them out, worrying on their behalf, and sort of not really having a great quality of life in their retirement because they're too busy worrying about their children. So it's not that they'll turn into an adult and then start looking after you.
Well, it's one of those myths,
It's not
isn't
a guarantee.
it? Yeah, I mean, you might not even live close to your parents. You might have a great relationship with them, but just not live near them.
Yes, so there's all sorts of things like that.
Fiona, I know that a couple of years ago, after you realised you weren't going to be having a family, you decided to make one of your lifelong dreams come true. So tell us all about that, because I love this and I think it's really interesting and inspiring, especially for those who've always dreamed of writing.
Yes, I have always been a very creative person. Right from a young age, I used to make things and write things, and I just loved creating. And I've always worked in quite dull office jobs because I thought, well, that's just something I can do easily. And I ended up, it was before the internet, it was hard to write. Well, it's not hard to write a book. It's hard at any time. But publishing a book wasn't easy, and I sort of looked into agents and they weren't taking on new authors. And I thought, well, I'll just have to have it as a fun dream and I'll do my other creative stuff instead. And I would write outlines for books and I would write chapters, and they sort of would just sit on my computer. And then blogs came along, and that was exciting. I could have my own little online magazine, it felt like, and I could write new posts and what I loved to talk about. And also people that loved what I liked as well, they would come along and find me easily because of keywords and things, which none of us even knew about those at the time, but it was just like magic that all these lovely ladies around the world could find us, and we could find their blogs as well and be inspired by them. And leading on from that, about 3 years ago, I was inspired by other people that were doing a similar thing to self-publish a Kindle book. And it was a series of blog posts. It was curated blog posts on a certain topic. And I would label them honestly on Amazon that it was a collection of blog posts, and for a small cost they could have it sent to their Kindle, or they could read it for free on my blog. And that was well received by my readers, and it gave me the confidence that if I put the time into writing a book, that it would be not just sit there unloved. So I did that, and I actually already had a book that I had written years before that I kept adding to, and then just stuffing it away in the cupboard, kept getting it out and going, oh, this is really good. And because I'd printed out pages and put it in a binder. And then one day I thought, I'm going to do it. So I got my binder out and I added to the chapters and shaped it into a book. And that was my book, 30 Chic Days, which is practical inspiration for a beautiful life. And that is still my bestseller, and it came out in June 3 years ago.
So
2 years ago. I get mixed up. Yeah, it's very exciting. And we moved, my husband and I moved from the city last year. We moved from Auckland to Hawke's Bay, where I grew up. And we now live in the country, like country light. We have 4 acres and we live 5 minutes from town.
Yeah.
And we have a couple of cows and some sheep in our paddock. And when we moved here, because we'd been so thrifty in Auckland and really worked on paying off our mortgage, and then we sold our house, and Auckland prices are higher than Hawke's Bay houses.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, because we've sort of gotten a bit ahead, or it feels like we've gotten ahead of ourselves financially, maybe I could have a part-time job instead of a full-time job, and I could spend time at home being a lovely pottering housewife and doing lovely things. Which I just like. I just love being at home, being such an introvert. But then I realized, well, actually, I've created that income with my books. And so now I get to be at home all the time and write about things that I enjoy, and it's my income. And it does actually feel like a dream come true. And
so how many books have you got published online now then?
I've got my first blog books, which I don't really count as a real book because I'd sort of, even though it is, I guess, but I've got 5 apart from that. So I've got 5 or 6, depending on which one, if I count the first one.
Brilliant. And I know that... Sorry, I was going to say, and I read that you'd also been approached and you were having a couple of them translated into other languages by a publisher.
Yes, I have. I do forget about those ones sometimes.
Which is very exciting.
I know. I had... the Christmas before last, I had a lady from Lithuania email me and say, oh, I'd like to publish your book. I thought, oh, is this some scam? I don't know anybody in Lithuania. And this lady had come across my book or been shown my book, and I researched the company, and it was Lithuania's oldest publishing house.
Wow.
And it seemed quite real, legit. So I found myself a publishing lawyer in the US. They don't exist here in New Zealand because, well, I couldn't find one. And because, we're quite a small country, and this is still quite an unusual thing to do for most people. And she helped me out, go through my contract, and that book has been published. I now have 6 copies on my shelf of 30 Chic Days in Lithuanian. Brilliant. And I also had an email from a Russian publishing house, and they are in the process of translating and publishing the same book into Russian. So it is very exciting.
Gosh, that is
Yes.
amazing. And so one of the things actually that I'm hearing more and more about self-publishing, and I suppose your testament to this is how when you do that, you really are taking control of your own destiny and saying, I'm going to do this. You're not waiting around to see if a traditional publishing house is interested. And then even if it is, because I've got friends who have been traditionally published and self-published, so there seem to be pros and cons to both, but one thing being that often if you're traditionally published, you might be waiting 2 years till it's published and on the shelves. And I think that must be really frustrating if you've kind of already moved on to other projects and you're writing other things. And then it's like, wow, that seems like a long time, to wait, doesn't it?
It does move slowly. And that is the cool thing about self-publishing. You can say, I'm going to give myself a month to write this book. And it might just, because you can write a book of any length. It doesn't need to be a full-size book, especially on Kindle. I mean, I've bought books that I've loved that are 50 or 100 or 150 pages on Kindle, whereas 200 to 300 would be an absolute minimum, probably more likely 300 for a normal, published print copy book. And of course, you can't really publish a print copy of a 50-page book, but you can do anything on Kindle. And probably 3/4 of my sales are Kindle and 25% would be print copies. So it's not like you're really missing out on a lot of readers if you decide to just do Kindle to start with. And
I suppose it could be a good way to experiment like you did, like pulling together blog posts, creating something and just learning the process and testing the water. And did you find that it's actually, because I know you've taught yourself how to do everything as part of that process. And then, of course, you're sharing that with other women in your e-course about how to pull all the information together and be motivated and write your book if you've always wanted to do that in a very practical way.
Thank you. Yes, I did have quite a few ladies, a lot of ladies email me at various times after I'd started publishing my books and said, I really want to write, but I just don't even know where to start. Can you tell me how you started? So I sort of started putting together information, and I had I still have a free writer's encouragement email list where I give little tips to start you off on what to do or just basically how I did it, because there's so many different ways to do it, but just the ways that I worked best for me in my, I guess, the way I'm creative and sort of my personality. But I suppose if you follow somebody on a blog, you relate to them and might have similarities. So it was helpful to other ladies, and it ended up being I just had so much information to share that it's now in a 6-week online training program called Create Your Dream Life as a Successful Author.
And I started getting those inspiration emails from you, and I can say to anyone who's listening, sign up to get them, because one of the things that you said, which really resonated with me, is, that sometimes you can hear the same information over and over, but you might only really get it and it might only really sink in when you hear that from one person in particular, because you just resonate with them, or it's the timing or whatever it is. And that really struck a chord with me, because often so much of it is practical and it's but it's a combination of it can be so many different factors, that impetus. But I just feel as though the way you write and talk about it, you make it seem really easy. And I think that there's a real gift in that in itself.
And it's just how I approach things.
Yeah.
I can only I can't make myself do anything. I can only do it if it's fun and easy. And that's just, I've realized that about myself, and I no longer berate myself for it, that I'm lazy or something like that. It's just that something does have to be fun and easy for it to catch my imagination and have me follow through on it. And so that's how I talk about writing. And I actually said it earlier in this interview that writing a book is hard. And I don't know where that came from, because it's not. Yes, it takes time, but if you choose topics that really speak to you, and you're sort of talking to someone as you write the chapter, it's not actually hard at all. It's really, really easy and fun.
Yeah, and also, even if you're writing or communicating about a topic that you feel has been covered a million times, it's still never been covered in your voice, with your voice.
Exactly. Yes.
So,
And I found that when I was listening to podcasts like yourself, there might be some information, but just the way somebody says it, I really take it in. And that gave me the confidence that, well, all the stuff I'm writing about, none of it's new, and there's nothing really even new in the world. So, but the way you're talking about it is. So if a lady might say to me, oh, I really want to write about home as a nurturing sanctuary and how to create that, but look at how many books there are already on that. But it's never been said by you in the way that you say it, through the lens of your experience and your inspiration. And somebody needs to hear that. And if you decide, no, I'm not going to do it because there's too many books written about that already, people will be missing out. You're actually doing people a disservice by keeping it all to yourself.
yeah, that's true. That's a really good way to look at it, isn't it? Because even if only one person was impacted by that, then it's worth it. And often that advice of write the book that you want to read, I think that's a really good comment as well, because if you're not excited or passionate or interested in the topic, then that's going to be conveyed through the book, isn't it, really? If you're not that interested, but you think, well, I know a lot about this, so I should write something about that. Well, not necessarily if you're not excited by it.
No, and you likely won't even get past the first chapter. You'll be so bored with yourself. It has to be something, unless you're really good at discipline, which I'm not. You might finish it if you're really good, if you're a really disciplined person, but the enthusiasm won't come out, because I don't know if you found that. I'm sure you have with people's books. You can hear their voice when they're writing, but it's just words on a page.
Yeah, and some people, you pick up some writing and you really do feel like you're having a conversation with that person, the tone, the way that they convey that. And often it doesn't mean that it's really formal. It can be very informal, but it can be just that they've got a very clear voice. They're really themselves in how that's being communicated, and people can feel that.
I much prefer the conversational kind of writing where it's just like you're talking to a friend. And with books like that, afterwards, you feel like they're your friend and they really care about you. And they do. Like when they're writing it, they do. Yeah. It just, you sort of can't fake being a nice person, I don't think, because our sort of instincts can sniff out insincerity instantly. And so if you're a kind person and you've got something interesting to say, I think you need to write a book.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So that's so interesting. So it sounds as though you're really using a lot of your nurturing and caring qualities that you might have been able to use on a family if life had turned out differently, but you're pouring that into your work. And do you feel as though it's amazing that because you've then had that space and let that possibility go, you've then had the space and the energy then to really throw yourself into this?
That's a great thought. I really like that. And it's not something that I thought about, but it makes a lot of sense that, it is a huge thing to raise children, and I honestly don't know how any mums do it because it looks really full on, and I'm sure it is. But I guess that would take up a lot of your nurturing energy just because it has to. It's just the way it is. So I've got plenty of that to spare because cats and dogs are a bit more easy care. And so I do have a lot of nurturing energy for my writing. That's a good thought. I like it.
Well, it's just that thing of how we're all creative in one form or another, just because we are cyclical beings, like being women. We are sort of very, we have our own cycles. We're very connected to the cycles of nature. And of course, any creative endeavor that you're bringing into the physical.
And it's not just books. I know people that say, oh, I could never write a book, I'm not creative like you, but that's only one tiny thing. There's so many ways to be creative in life. There's I have an auntie who said, oh, I can't do all the things that you do like knitting and sewing, but she writes poetry and she makes amazing food, like just makes it look so easy, but she writes poetry and she discounts that because it's easy for her. And that's what we do.
Yeah, that's so true. That's a really good point, isn't it? Often our innate natural gifts we don't always value because
we skip over it.
Yeah, we think that it should be harder. That's what we've been conditioned to do, when in actual fact, maybe we've got it completely wrong. And the things that we find easy, we should realize, actually, this is a strength of mine. I need to value it more. And
it's what we should be doing rather than,
Yes.
Or could be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And just making life easier for ourselves. And that's really the way of the feminine flow as well, actually, is, relaxing into that. But so often in our society, we're very conditioned to, it's got to be more structured. It's got to be, it's got to be harder. We need to just keep going. We need to keep doing. I'm not doing enough. I need to do more. I can
so relate to that.
Yeah. So I
can really struggle against making it easy sometimes and letting it flow. It's just this mental struggle that I have sometimes where I just think, I should be doing more. I should be working harder. I should be more disciplined. I should be more structured. I should tick everything off my list. And it just makes you crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not very relaxing.
No, it's not. And we just, sort of wonder, where do all the shoulds come from?
Yeah, it's definitely something I work on every day.
Yeah. So, well, thank you, Fiona. That is just so interesting to hear that. And I love the way that you then were able to have that ability to just let go and be very philosophical about it and just think, I'm not going to keep trying something for 10 years, banging my head on a brick wall. If it's not happening, then I'll switch my focus elsewhere and then see what other possibility there is.
Yeah, for sure. No, it definitely was the right path for us. It's not the right path for everybody, but I just felt for me, and I guess there's just taking out everyone else's words out of the equation and just working out what I want and what's best for me and my husband. And I'm sure if I had wanted to pursue it more, he would have too. So he was led by me, pretty much. But yeah, it's just worked out really well.
And I think what you say then is really key in just, it's so important for women to really try not to be too overly influenced by other people's opinions, especially with family and close friends. And also it can be, when religion comes into it as well, that can add another layer of expectation. So
definitely.
It's so important if you can just really have that time to think, what is it that I really want? Do I feel that this is really in alignment with, my life path, or is it just what I've been conditioned to believe is what I should be doing? Is this going to make me happy? And just really try to make a decision from there.
Definitely. And it's not that I didn't want to have children. I always fully expected that I would have 3 children.
Yeah.
It wasn't that I really had that as a goal. I just always, in the back of my mind, thought, well, that's just what happens when you get older.
Yes.
You have children, get married and have children.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I feel quite grateful that it's worked out that I'm okay with it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so, Fiona, would you like to share where people can find out more about you and your course and check out your books and stuff online and connect with you?
Thank you, Michelle. I am on Amazon under my name, Fiona Ferris, and my blog is at howtobechic.com and also fionaferris.com. You can find me there as well. And there's links on there to my social media pages, Fiona Ferris Author on Facebook and Fiona Ferris NZ on Instagram.
Well, brilliant. Thank you so much. And I
Thank
look
you for
forward.
a wonderful chat.
No, well, thank you. And I look forward to your next book coming out.
Yes, very excited about that. I'm about 2/3 of the way through it.
Brilliant.
And it'll be out soon. So it's very exciting. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Unclassified Woman. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. For information on events and services, connect with Michelle at michellemariemcgrath.com.